I knew things were changing the moment Bryce dropped the word synergy unironically during his first all hands. That smug, two-button suit wearing, MBA without the M came strutting in like he just invented capitalism, not inherited a corner office from the man who used to call me the spine of this place. I've seen startup bros come and go, but this one had the confidence of a man who's never had to earn his parking spot. 17 years. That's how long I'd been with Halcyon Systems. I joined back when our servers were held together with duct tape and hope, and our marketing team was just whoever could make a halfway decent PowerPoint. I was there before we got the funding rounds, before we outgrew 2 office buildings, and long before anyone had ever heard of Bryce with a Y. The founder, Mr. Halcyon himself, Arthur, built this company from a folding table in a rented storage unit. He used to say, "Jen, processes make permanence." And I made sure every process had a paper trail, a timestamp, and a backup. When you've been somewhere long enough, you stop needing a title to know your worth. Technically, I was Chief Operations Liaison, whatever the hell that meant to outsiders. Internally, I was the person you called when procurement stalled, compliance panicked, or legal forgot which version of the charter we were using. I kept the whole machine running without ever needing to raise my voice. Then Arthur got sick. He started fading about a year ago. Quietly at first, missed meetings, forgotten names, odd silences. He still had moments of clarity, but the board got nervous. And nervous boards do stupid things, like handing the reins over to Bryce, Arthur's wet-nosed nephew, who once asked if we could just chat GPT our compliance reports. I wish I were kidding. From the second Bryce set foot in the office with his polished loafers and fake humility, I knew I had a countdown running over my head. He made a speech about modernizing legacy systems while never once looking me in the eye. His eyes, for the record, were usually glued to his phone, scrolling through whatever crypto clown was promising to 10x his ego. I started noticing things. My calendar permissions got weirdly restricted. People I'd mentored were suddenly CCing me instead of inviting me. And I overheard him in the hallway telling HR I had museum energy. Here's the thing about being underestimated: it gives you time. Quiet time. The kind where you revisit old files, pull up those dusty PDFs nobody's opened since 2008, and remember every handshake that ever meant something. Arthur and I had an understanding. He trusted me to safeguard the company's foundation. And buried in those foundations, some very old, very real clauses with very sharp teeth. But hey, before I go full scorched earth, real quick, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed or hit the like button yet, now's your cue. 90% of folks just binge these stories like popcorn without showing love. But every like and sub keeps this little engine running, and it means the world to the team busting their butts behind the scenes. Now, back to Bryce's slow-motion car crash. I didn't fight the shift. I let him replace our vendor liaison with his frat brother from Sigma Chi. I watched him convert our internal wiki into a Slack channel called Bryce Notes. I even smiled when he rolled out Fun Shirt Fridays like it was a new federal holiday. But what I also did was quietly renew my notary license, dust off a certain 19-page document signed by Arthur in 2009, and begin logging every interaction with HR into a private email thread titled "If This Idiot Fires Me." I knew the final blow would come suddenly. Bryce didn't have the spine for confrontation. He was more the schedule a meeting at 7:30 a.m. and bring coffee like a psychopath type. So I waited. And while I waited, I made damn sure every piece of paper he'd never read was in order. Every clause he would have mocked had been verified. Every signature was notarized. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preserving structure. The structure he was too arrogant to understand. Because here's what Bryce never learned in business school, or at least not in between keg stands and TED talk shorts. The person who understands the foundation holds the power to shake the entire house. And I was about to shake it. It happened at 7:59 a.m. on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Only a coward picks a time before most people have even poured their first cup of coffee. I was still locking my car in the garage when I saw the meeting invite pop up. Subject line, quick sync. Location, HR conference room B. Sent at 7:56. No context, no prep, just vibes. Bryce was already there when I walked in, legs crossed, sipping some green sludge from a mason jar like he'd just emerged from a yoga retreat in a tech cult. HR Director Melissa sat beside him like a hostage, pretending her makeup could conceal the dread in her eyes. I gave her a nod. She didn't return it. He didn't waste time. "Jennifer," he said, like the name tasted sour in his mouth. "We've been evaluating our organizational strategy, and after a lot of difficult discussions," he actually smiled here, the bastard, "we've decided to sunset your role as part of our modernization initiative." Sunset, he said, like I was a failed email campaign. I blinked once. That was it. No tears, no gasps. I just tilted my head the way you do when a child proudly presents you a drawing of a dragon that's clearly just a squiggle with eyes. I didn't need to hear the rest, but he gave it anyway. "We really appreciate your historical contributions," he added, dragging out the word historical like I was a fossil he'd found in a filing cabinet. "It's important to stay relevant in today's landscape." That last line, that was the gift. The phrase that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just cutting dead weight. He thought this was a teaching moment. Consider this your final lesson, he said, like he was the sensei in a startup-themed karate movie. I smiled, tight-lipped, no teeth, no words, just nodded once and stood, picked up my purse. Didn't even bother taking the travel mug I'd just set down. The walkout felt like the longest, slowest parade I'd ever marched in. Except no one clapped. They just averted their eyes like I had become contagious. The elevator ride down was blessedly empty. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. I got into my car, shut the door, and screamed. Not loud, not primal. Just one short, guttural burst like letting steam out of a cracked pipe. Then I opened my banking app, deposited my final paycheck. Bryce had it ready. Smug little overachiever, and clicked confirm. That timestamp mattered. Next stop, Notary Public. I had the letter already printed, sealed, and labeled for board legal counsel immediate review. All it needed was the seal. The notary raised an eyebrow when she read the first line but didn't ask questions. Just signed, stamped, and slid it back. Then came the courier. I'd prepaid the same-day service 2 weeks ago, labeled time-sensitive legal document. The driver asked if it needed a signature on delivery. I told him yes, but only from the company's general counsel. Not HR, not Bryce, no substitutes. He left and I sat back in my car, parked outside the coffee shop across the street from the office. I didn't go home. I watched. Through the tinted windows, I saw Bryce leave the building an hour later, laughing with someone from strategy, probably the same frat brother he hired to run analytics, despite thinking a Gantt chart was a type of cheese. What Bryce didn't know was that the letter now in transit contained more than just flowery goodbyes or legal grumbling. It was a formal notice of termination acknowledgement, executed by the party of the second part, me, per Section 4.8 of the 2009 Operational Reversion Agreement. A clause so old, even most of legal forgot it existed, but I hadn't. I helped Arthur draft that agreement when we incorporated. He was paranoid back then, terrified the board might someday be swayed by blood ties instead of competence. So we wrote safeguards, legal tripwires, checks buried so deep they might as well have been written in invisible ink. But I kept copies, in triplicate, stored in 2 places, encrypted in one. That clause stated that if I were ever terminated without full board approval and severance, in compliance with original charter terms, operational control of Halcyon systems would revert, within 72 hours, to the Founders Trust and to the appointee listed therein. Bryce had just pulled the pin on his own grenade. And the best part? He still thought I was just historical. Bryce posted a gif of a broom sweeping in the exec Slack channel with the caption, "Spring cleaning, baby, out with the old." Someone reacted with a fire emoji. Another added the little clapping hands. I know this because someone forwarded me the thread. They shouldn't have, but they did. Loyalty's a funny thing. It doesn't always fade just because you're no longer on payroll. From his corner office, which, for the record, used to be a supply closet, until Bryce had it remodeled with mid-century synergy vibes, he strutted around like a man who'd just slayed a dragon, not pushed out the one person keeping his feet out of legal quicksand. He ordered a catered lunch for the exec team that day. Poke bowls and kombucha. Celebrated my graceful exit with a toast about removing legacy friction. I'm told he even pitched a new org chart titled The Future Forward, printed in Helvetica, like that was supposed to mean something. I wasn't surprised. Bryce had all the emotional depth of a damp paper towel. What I was counting on was his arrogance. The same arrogance that made him shrug off the legal memo his assistant slid under his smoothie that afternoon. I imagine it went something like this. Hey, legal flagged something in the old governance archives about Jennifer's termination. They said it might warrant review. Bryce probably waved it off between bites of his kale avocado whatever. We sunsetted that clause years ago. Let compliance run in circles if they want. But we hadn't, because I hadn't let them. Every 3 years like clockwork during compliance audits, I ensured the reversion clause stayed active, recertified, renotarized, and I had the PDF trail to prove it. Most of the current team wasn't around in 2009. They didn't know the founder's paranoia ran deep. They didn't know that I was the one who helped design that clause, back when we both believed Halcyon needed permanent safeguards from, well, exactly what Bryce had become. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was just continuity. Meanwhile, the courier was halfway across the city, tracking GPS pings as he weaved through traffic. The envelope in his satchel bore my seal, the same one Arthur and I used back when we filed our first Delaware incorporation paperwork. Inside, the notarized execution notice, cross-referenced with board charter documents, and a copy of Arthur's trust appointment directive. Dated, signed, filed with the state, unaltered. The language was precise. In the event that Jennifer L. Crane is involuntarily terminated without documented cause, and if said termination fails to meet the severance and board notification standards outlined in Article 7.2, then operational oversight shall revert to the Founders Trust. Control shall transfer to the Trust's appointed successor within 72 business hours of executed notice. barring direct board intervention with unanimous override, which shall require the founder's written assent. They had no override, and Arthur hadn't signed anything in over 9 months. Bryce didn't know the clock was ticking. He didn't know the courier was 3 blocks away when he posted a TikTok of himself on the office balcony with the caption, "Making room for innovation." Let's go. Didn't know that legal was already calling in an intern to dig through the archived governance binders, the physical ones no one ever looked at unless I asked them to. Back at home, I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour wine. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote out a timeline, old school. 7:59 a.m. termination. 8:41 a.m. notary seal affixed. 9:02 a.m. courier dispatched. By 12:03 p.m., it was marked as delivered and signed for by Halcyon Systems General Counsel, Lisa Hallbrook. I had a paper trail, timestamps, emails, tracking confirmations, even a recorded voicemail to my personal counsel noting the event, all within the window. That evening, I received a single-line email from Lisa. Please confirm whether you've executed the reversion clause as outlined in Article 4.8. I replied, executed, timestamped, and delivered as required, effective as of today. I signed it warm regards because I'm a professional. Then I sat back, opened a pack of saltines, and watched the Slack notifications pile up on my burner phone. The whispers had begun. Not panic yet, but it would come. They just didn't know it was already too late. The thing about watching a building collapse from the outside is it's quieter than you'd expect. No dramatic fireball, no sirens, just little cracks spreading through the concrete while everyone inside keeps sipping their kombucha and pretending nothing's wrong. By Thursday, 2 days post-termination, Bryce had already fired 3 other senior staffers. All of them had been with Halcyon since the early growth years. Our VP of Vendor Relations? Gone. Payroll Systems Manager? Out. The woman who built our onboarding framework from scratch while pregnant with twins? Reassigned. That one hit me harder than I expected. Her name was Patris. She brought me soup during a flu season in 17. Now she was escorted out without a goodbye email. In their place, frat bros, literal frat bros. His old college roommate Zach, who once got kicked off campus for hosting a whiteboard margarita night, was now our new chief strategy architect. No background in tech, no background in anything unless you count motivational crypto threads on Twitter. Another buddy named Kyle was installed as head of organizational vibes. I swear to you that was his title. Organizational vibes. Inside sources, meaning a few brave souls who still had me on their personal WhatsApp, sent me screenshots of Bryce's morning pep talks. Legacy doesn't equal loyalty, he wrote on Wednesday. We're building a future, not worshiping a past. Keep your energy clean, your ideas disruptive. Someone else captioned one of his videos with, "This is what happens when a LinkedIn post grows legs and walks into your office." I nearly choked on my coffee. From my little home office, nothing fancy, just a window seat and a beat-up desk. I sipped my dark roast and watched the Slack leaks roll in like postcards from a ship headed straight for the iceberg. Someone sent me a spreadsheet, projected cash flow for Q4. It had my formulas, my color coding, my notes in the margins still intact. Bryce had replaced the top row with a header labeled, "Optimized by Bryce." That man couldn't format a cell if you paid him in NFTs. Then came the HR fumble. Late Friday afternoon, I got a weird alert. My online access to the company's internal HR portal briefly reactivated. Not full access, just a window, long enough for me to glimpse a modified file, the official termination notice. Dated Wednesday. 2 full days after Bryce gave me the boot in person. They were trying to backdate the event, maybe to buy time, maybe to shift the 72-hour reversion clause trigger. Who knows, amateurs? Here's the problem with rewriting history when the historian kept receipts. I had my timestamped check deposit, the notarized courier slip, the signed delivery confirmation, and my legal reply all dated Tuesday. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. She replied with a 2-word email, "Let them." By Friday night, word was spreading inside Halcyon. Nothing loud, just whispers. Someone from product pinged my old assistant asking if she had a copy of the founder's charter. Another from legal called in sick pending document clarification. One particularly brave IT analyst apparently told Zach the vibes were concerning after being asked to sign off on some half-baked platform migration. That night, I got an email from an anonymous Proton Mail account. Subject line, "He's bragging about replacing you with AI." Inside was a screen grab from a company-wide Slack where Bryce said, "Honestly, Jennifer's whole job could have been done by a decent plugin. We're future-proofing now." No one responded to the message, just a string of eye emojis. I didn't reply to the Proton Mail. I just saved the image to a folder called Ignition Files. The folder also contained a copy of the reversion clause, an audio recording of Arthur discussing succession planning, and one glorious video of Bryce pronouncing fiduciary as fiduciary during an onboarding Zoom. By Sunday, I knew the countdown was entering its final phase. Bryce didn't, he was too busy planning a company-wide rebrand. The theme, new blood, no baggage, that tagline wouldn't age well, but it'd look real nice printed across his exit packet. The Monday board meeting was supposed to be routine. A quick touchpoint, a few Q3 slide decks, some half-baked performance metrics from the new Vibe Ops team Bryce invented out of thin air. The kind of meeting where everyone politely nods while secretly checking fantasy football stats under the table. Instead, it turned into the slow, audible sound of ice cracking beneath thin corporate shoes. It started innocently enough. Bryce kicked things off with a standing PowerPoint, literally standing, as if looming made his Q2 dip look intentional. He wore a quarter zip and jeans like he thought he was the second coming of Steve Jobs, minus the intellect or even the courtesy of deodorant. Team, he said, pacing slowly. We're shaking things up. No more institutional drag. No more legacy molasses. We're lean, we're mean, we're Halcyon 2.0. The board members smiled thinly, the way you do when a waiter insists on describing the specials in graphic detail. Lisa Hallbrook, general counsel, didn't smile. She was flipping through a thick manila folder with the energy of someone looking for a ticking bomb. She paused on a page about halfway through and went still. Dead still. Bryce didn't notice. He was too busy waxing poetic about vertical growth via decentralized strategy, whatever the hell that meant. Lisa finally raised a hand. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but a document just came in over the weekend. Time-stamped, notarized, and delivered by a legal courier. Bryce waved a dismissive hand. If it's from Jennifer, I already told HR to ignore the noise. Lisa didn't blink. It's not noise. The room shifted. You could feel the silence take shape. One of the external board members, a gray-haired man with a pen perpetually tapping his knee, glanced over. Is this a legal issue? Lisa adjusted her glasses. Potentially. I'd like to call a recess to review the validity of a clause referenced in the document. Clause? Bryce scoffed. Lisa, we sunsetted most of the old paperwork during the last audit. I was told legal was modernizing everything. Lisa's voice was like ice water. We sunsetted the templates, not the governing documents, and this clause predates our digital archive. The board chair, a no-nonsense woman named Meredith, leaned forward. How old are we talking? Lisa flipped the page around and tapped a signature. 2009. Arthur Halcyon's original charter. This clause was reviewed and reaffirmed during our 2018 compliance cycle, signed by both Arthur and the then-active board. Bryce let out a little laugh. Okay, great. So what? Jennifer found some dusty footnote and thinks she's staging a coup? Come on, no one laughed with him. Lisa closed the folder. The document isn't just a complaint, it's a formal execution notice, triggered by her termination. It references Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement. Meredith frowned. Is that enforceable? Lisa didn't answer right away. She just said, I need 30 minutes in a quiet room. Bryce tried to lighten the mood. Look, this is what happens when you keep dead wood around too long. She was always a bit dramatic. Again, silence. He looked around the room and added seriously, You're not buying this, right? One board member cleared their throat. I think we'd all benefit from clarity. Let's reconvene after Lisa has had time to review. They stood, chairs scraped, papers shuffled. Lisa moved quickly. Folder in hand, her jaw set. Bryce leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. This is exactly why I fired her, he muttered to no one in particular. This dusty clause nonsense, holding us back. But even as he said it, you could see the first flicker of doubt in his eyes, like he knew something was different this time. Like maybe, just maybe, Jennifer hadn't left quietly because she was broken. Maybe she left quietly because she was ready. And the thing about clocks, they don't stop just because you're too arrogant to hear the ticking. The room was colder when they reconvened, not physically, just spiritually. Like the HVAC had sucked the confidence straight out of the air. Bryce came back from break 5 minutes late, iced matcha in hand, sunglasses still perched on his head like he'd just wandered in from a beachside startup summit. He was trying to project calm, but even from a distance, could see the cracks spidering beneath his veneer. Lisa Hallbrook returned with 2 additional folders. One red, one black, and a look on her face like she'd just read the last page of a horror novel, one where the monster had been in the house the whole time. Meredith, the board chair, wasted no time. Lisa, your findings? Lisa didn't sit. She remained standing, one hand on the black folder. The clause in question, Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, is valid. It was reaffirmed during the 2018 compliance cycle, certified by Arthur Halcyon and 2 prior board members, one of whom is still serving. One of the gray hairs nodded slowly, clearly doing mental math on whether he'd signed something while half asleep at a retreat in Napa. Lisa continued. The clause was designed to prevent unilateral termination of key legacy personnel without full board review and severance compliance. If violated, it triggers a 72-hour reversion period. We're already 48 hours in. Bryce rolled his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Come on, that clause was always symbolic. You said so yourself years ago. It was like ceremonial, not enforceable. Lisa didn't blink. No, I said it was obscure, not symbolic, and it's enforceable. The severance terms were not met. The board was not notified in writing prior to termination. Founders Trust holds final authority in the event of a reversion. He sat up straighter. You're saying this thing, it's real? Lisa opened the black folder. Inside was a printed copy of the clause, signed by Arthur and initialed by Jennifer Crane, dated, stamped, and notarized. It's not just real, Bryce, it's active. And if we don't find a way to reverse it within the next 23 hours, operational control of Halcyon Systems reverts to the appointee listed in the trust. Bryce scoffed. Arthur hasn't updated that trust in years. You think he even remembers what he wrote down? Lisa's tone shifted. Sharper now, that doesn't matter. The trust has legal standing. And unless we can produce an updated document, which I've confirmed we cannot, then we are bound by what was last filed. Bryce stood, pacing. No, this is insane. This is not how governance works. You can't just undo a CEO because someone found a dusty binder. Pen-tapping board member finally spoke. You fired someone with a direct connection to the founder and assumed the paperwork wouldn't bite back. That's not a dusty binder, Bryce. That's a loaded gun you handed her. Bryce turned on Lisa. Why didn't legal flag this sooner? Lisa was calm. Too calm. We did. I emailed you a week before her termination suggesting we conduct a legacy document audit. You replied with a thumbs-up emoji and lol. A beat of silence. Meredith exhaled, slow and deliberate. So what happens if the clock runs out? Lisa opened the red folder this time. Then the appointee listed in the trust assumes operational oversight of Halcyon Systems, interim or otherwise, until such time as the board votes to restructure the charter. And the founder's written override is required for any changes. Arthur can't even hold a pen, Bryce muttered. Lisa's voice dropped. Then I suggest you use the time left to get creative. Bryce looked at the board. Desperate now, we can contest it. File for emergency injunction, delay the clause. Lisa, you'd need standing, which you don't have. The clause explicitly removes power from the acting CEO in the event of a triggering event. Then I'll call Arthur. He's under medical supervision. And you're not on the authorized contact list for trust matters. Jennifer is. The room froze. Meredith turned slowly. Excuse me, Lisa nodded. She was granted contact privileges in 2021. She's the only non-family individual with access to the trust files. Bryce dropped into his chair like someone had cut the strings in his knees. You're telling me she's the one? Lisa didn't answer. She didn't need to, because even Bryce could see it now. The one person he'd fired to prove a point had just become the point. And the worst part, we're still 23 hours left on the clock. By Tuesday morning, the walls were officially sweating. Bryce hadn't shaved. His once gelled hair stuck up in defiance, like even his follicles had turned on him. He paced the boardroom with the wild-eyed energy of a man trying to speedrun denial. The aura of startup swagger he wore like cologne had curdled into something desperate and thin. The board had reconvened early. Phones off. No assistants. No snacks. Just 12 people in a room trying to determine whether the company was about to legally eat itself. Meredith opened the meeting without pleasantries. We've confirmed the clause is active. We've confirmed the trigger conditions were met. The trust is holding. There's no override from Arthur on file. She looked at Lisa. Which brings us to the next step, Lisa said. Her voice was measured, clipped, lawyer clean. We need to confirm the identity of the named appointee. The Founders Trust designates a successor in the event of operational reversion. She placed a sealed manila envelope on the table, the kind that made paper feel like it could detonate. This file has not been opened since it was placed into trust custody in 2019. Sealed in the presence of Arthur Halcyon, 2 witnesses, and a notary public. There is one name inside, the appointed successor. Bryce let out a bitter laugh. This is a joke, right? You guys seriously want to roll company control based on an envelope? What is this, Willy Wonka Corporate Edition? No one answered. Lisa just stared at him, then slowly slid open the top of the envelope with a letter opener. She slid out a single ivory sheet, unfolded it, silence. She didn't read the name aloud, just paused, read it again, then turned the paper and passed it to Meredith. Meredith read it. Her brow creased, not in confusion, but in recognition. She exhaled once, sharp, almost like a cough that caught on a memory. She passed the paper to the board member beside her, and on it went. One by one, the sheet made its quiet, devastating pilgrimage around the room. No reactions, no questions, just a shared understanding that something irreversible had just arrived. Bryce's voice cracked. Can someone just say it out loud? No one looked at him. He stood up. Say the goddamn name. Meredith finally turned to him. Her face unreadable. Jennifer L. Crane. The words fell like a stone in a frozen lake, no splash, just a long, deep crack that kept spreading. Bryce actually stumbled back a step like the oxygen had been sucked out of his lungs. No, that's not possible. She was just operations. She was trusted, Lisa said quietly. He stared at her. You knew, I suspected, but I didn't know until now. Bryce ran a hand through his hair and let out a wild, dry laugh. You're telling me I fired the woman who's now legally in control of this company? Meredith nodded once. Yes, that's exactly what you did. He looked around the room like a man searching for escape hatches in drywall. We can override it, right? We can vote or no override without Arthur's written consent, Lisa interrupted. And as you've been reminded, Jennifer is the only one with trust access. If he's lucid and if he chooses to write something different, it has to go through her. The clock on the wall ticked, loud, obnoxiously loud. There were 15 hours left before the 72-hour window closed. 15 hours before control transferred fully, formally, irrevocably. And the name written in Arthur Halcyon's hand wasn't Bryce, it was Jennifer. The legacy molasses, the dead weight. The woman he thought he'd pushed off the chessboard. Except she wasn't off the board. She was the board. By 9 o'clock a.m., Bryce had called me 6 times. The first voicemail was cocky. "Hey Jennifer, look, we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Let's talk, yeah? Water under the bridge and all that." The second had a little more wobble. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Legal's kind of freaking out, and I'd love to clarify a few things if you're available." The third was just, "Please call me. Please." I didn't listen to the rest. I let them pile up like trash on a curb the night before collection. No response. No forwarding. No signal. Bryce was starting to understand that silence is its own language, and in this case it was screaming. Meanwhile, inside Halcyon HQ, the executive Slack channels had descended into the corporate version of a prison riot. Legal couldn't contain the leak. Someone, probably from the board, had whispered to someone at Venture Ledger that a legacy clause was in play and that the CEO's authority was under legal review. By noon, PR had fielded 9 calls from tech journalists. The 10th came from a local station who caught wind of executive instability and sent a camera crew to the front steps, just in time to film an intern having a panic attack outside. Bryce tried spinning it. He drafted a statement about collaborative transitions and elevating legacy leadership to advisory roles. Legal wouldn't approve it, said it could be interpreted as confirmation of loss of control. So he sent out a company-wide email titled, "Leadership Update Clarifying the Path Forward." Inside, nothing but fluff. No mention of the clause, no mention of the founder's trust, just a bloated wall of buzzwords stapled to panic. Within minutes, reply all came in from someone in accounting. Just 3 words, "Is Jennifer back?" That email was forwarded to me by 5 different people, each with a different emoji reaction. Back inside the boardroom, Bryce was clawing at shadows. He pulled Lisa aside. "There has to be a way to delay this. Revoke the clause, challenge the trust, something." Lisa didn't blink. "We've reviewed every scenario. There's no legal footing. Your only option is Jennifer, then get her on the phone. She's not answering your calls, then you call her." Lisa sighed. "This is the reckoning, Bryce. You lit the match. You don't get to be surprised the house is on fire." By 3 o'clock p.m., a decision was made to inform Arthur. His health had deteriorated sharply in the last few months, limited speech, limited energy, but he was still lucid in short bursts. And most importantly, still legally competent. The trust executor flew out that morning. Bryce wasn't allowed in the room. Instead, Lisa went. She returned just after 5 o'clock p.m. The board was gathered, phones off, tension thick. Lisa placed her notes on the table and said quietly, "The founder has been informed of the clause and the pending reversion." He was shown the notarized document, the timestamps, and the trust directive. Meredith asked softly, "Did he understand?" Lisa nodded, fully. When shown the name of the appointee, he smiled. That word, smiled. "Something to Bryce," he snapped. "This is insane. You're letting some dinosaur from the analog age hit a reset button on a 9-figure company because of what? Loyalty? Sentimentality? I built this place up." Lisa turned slowly. "No, Bryce, you inherited a seat at the table. She built the table." The board said nothing. There were 9 hours left. 9 hours until the clause locked into place and the reversion finalized. And Jennifer, she hadn't said a word. Not a press release. Not a phone call. Not even a tweet. She didn't need to shout. She already owned the silence. It was 7:58 a.m. on Thursday when the board reconvened. Same room, same table. But this time, every person seated had the haunted posture of someone who knew a guillotine was hanging just above their heads. No one spoke, no one coughed. The legal team was already seated, documents lined up like tombstones. Meredith, at the head, tapped her pen against the edge of a leather portfolio. 3 soft ticks, then a pause. 3 more. The only rhythm in a room frozen in anticipation. At exactly 8 o'clock a.m., the courier arrived. He didn't knock. He was let in by security per protocol for time-sensitive legal deliveries. He walked the length of the table and handed a slim envelope to Meredith. She opened it without ceremony. Inside, a notarized cover letter, a 12-page activation packet, a drive containing the clause validation video and compliance audit trail. Lisa read the first few lines, then nodded once. "It's done." Bryce, standing off to the side, half-shadowed by the blinds, laughed nervously. "So what now? She just waltzes in, wearing a cape?" As if on cue, the door opened. Jennifer Crane stepped in like she never left. No cape, no entourage. Just a black suit sharp enough to cut glass, her old halcyon badge clipped neatly to the lapel, and a single flash drive in her hand, the same one she'd carried back when she managed contracts tighter than Fort Knox. She walked to the head of the table without a word. Every eye followed her, not because they were told to, but because gravity had returned to the room. Actual leadership had arrived. She didn't stop, didn't nod, didn't smirk. She sat. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reverent. The kind of silence you give to surgeons before the first cut or judges before the final gavel. Meredith looked over the table. "Jennifer Crane has assumed operational oversight under Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement, effective immediately." She turned to Lisa. "Legal concurrence." Lisa nodded. "Clause executed. Chain of command has shifted." Meredith faced the room. motioned to acknowledge and enter this change into the governance record. All in favor, hands rose one by one. All opposed, no one moved. Bryce cleared his throat. You can't be serious. You're just going to hand her the keys? This is my company. Jennifer didn't even look at him. She opened her flash drive, connected it to the port in front of her, and waited as the screen came to life. A company-wide message populated the main dashboard. Title, Steady Hands, Clear Eyes. Below it, a simple paragraph about continuity, integrity, and respect for the values Halcyon was built on. It didn't need her name, everyone already knew. Security entered the room without a word. Bryce took a step back. Don't bother, he said, his voice brittle. I'll go. He turned to Jennifer. You really think you won? She finally looked up and smiled, not smug, not cruel, just calm, absolute, like the sun rising exactly when it said it would. Bryce, she said softly, nepotism's cute until it hits the charter. He froze. She stood, walked to him, and handed him a single sheet of paper, his separation agreement, already prepared, already signed by the board. As he took it, dazed, she leaned in just slightly, just enough for him to hear. Consider that your final lesson. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.